Hello, this is an overview of the IMFFDS system and its different components. As known, the system can be used by medical providers such as hospitals, private clinics, and medical labs, physicians, patients, admins, and in addition to insurance companies and third-party administrators. Of course, all of them except for the admin have to register and be licensed to use this system. Registration works by clicking on the registration screen, choosing the type, whether it's a provider, physician, or a patient, and filling in the required fields. Of course, the required fields differ from one type to another. So for the physician, these are the fields required: the national ID, the name, full name, the specialty, the physician type, if a doctor, medical analyst, nurse, or a pharmacist, the governorate, the city, marital status, the gender, and so on. For the patient, the fields required are also different, so you have to input the national ID and all the other required fields. We can go on with the steps of registering a new patient. So we begin by inputting the national ID, which of course has to be a correct one and one which was not registered in the system before. So it says that the national ID is incorrect. We have to make sure that this is a correct national ID. I missed a number. So then I can input the password, the name, as you can see, the gender and the birth date, the system knows them from the national ID which was input. I have to fill in everything, all the fields, so we can fill them, then fill in the Egyptian, Cairo, مقطم, the occupation, then we click on submit. We can see that the data has been entered successfully. Once the data has been entered successfully, we can then add a personal history. For example, what are the diseases that I had before or that patient had before, when was that diagnosed, whether it's recovered or not, the treatment which was taken, and finally if it is confidential. Confidential means that other physicians cannot see this data except with the patient's permission. Of course, the patient can also add some of the family medical history for the father, mother, spouse, son, or daughter, the same details as before, and he can add some medical documents, attachments as images. So now we can return back. As you can see, he logged in the patient, so we can log out once more. Now we go to the provider and try to log in with the provider, requiring his commercial registration number. Then I'll log in as one of the providers registered in the system. Of course, the username, the CR number, and the password have to be correct. Then login, choose one of the branches, let's choose the head provider. Then we're logged in as that provider manager. Once that provider is registered to the system, he is allowed to update his profile. Updating the profile consists of updating those fields which were present before. He can update the units or add a new unit. He has to input the name, the type, and whether it's a clinic or a lab, the specialty of that unit, and so on. And of course he can edit one of the units which were present. He can add physicians or edit physicians. He can view the services provided together with their price lists. And finally, he can add a branch. Of course, we have to know that or notice that the number of branches have to be equal or less than the indicated number of branches. That is, they do not have to exceed the indicated number of branches. When adding a new branch, the system allows the user it has a very good feature for the user, because it allows him to copy the data of the other branches into this branch. So after inputting the branch name and all the required fields, I can choose, or the provider can choose, to copy the units and the price list. Of course, physician is not that logical, so it's not added, and then add all the units and price lists are then copied to the new branch which is created. The provider also has the ability to add a new patient. When a patient comes to the hospital or clinic or a lab, that provider can then add the details of the patient if that patient was not registered into this system. Of course, as you can see, the screen consists of the same fields which were present before when a patient was registering. Providers can also search for a patient. Searching can be by national or ID or the patient name. We can input the national ID we've just created. Search. Okay, it displays all the details, the ID, the name, and so on. Of course, here we haven't yet input a medical history or visits or anything, so we can try searching by patient name. Displays patient names similar to this name, then I can submit. Here I can see the patient profile, the medical history, the diseases which they had, the diagnosis, age, whether it's recovered or not, the treatment, and as you can see over here, there is some confidential history for this patient, which means that this patient chose that some of his details will not be available to anyone, so they have to input the patient's password in order to view this confidential data. The visits, we can search by date interval, to view all the visits of this patient. Then if there are any medical attachments, so here there is the brain scan and we can see it. This was searching for a patient and viewing his details. After searching that, the provider can also add or search for visits. So, of course, he can search for other physicians. He can also add a visit. In order to add a visit, he has to choose the clinic name. And, of course, the physicians for this clinic are viewed over here, so we can choose one. To input the patient national ID, let's also work with the patient we've just created. Once we input the ID, the patient information are viewed over here. We have to choose the admission type, inpatient or outpatient. For the inpatient, we input the room number. the bed number, the visit reason, for example, back pain, the duration of illness, 7 days, that was a week, the pain score, like 4 or 5, I think. Once we click on submit, the visit is created and the visit ID is shown to the user, or here in this case the provider. This visit ID is very important to be recorded by the provider in order to be used later for updating the visit, or in order to be used later actually to search for a visit or to give it to the patient, or for any reasons. We can see the visit information. This is the general or emergency. We have to input all the required fields, or some of those fields as relevant to the visit. For example, if he is obese and smoking person, the symptoms and so on. Diagnosis. We can add a diagnosis. We can search for a specific diagnosis or get all, then choose one, and then we can add this diagnosis. As you can see, there are different ones. So this one, for example, is car occupant injured in collision with fixed or stationary object. Then we click on add. It takes some time to add, so we can wait and then add. That's good. So the diagnosis has been added. We can similarly add the medicine by searching for all, and the same thing for the in services, out services, and medical documents. We can try loading a medical document, for example, chest x-ray. I can then go to browse. Then I can browse. Okay, go to the tools and pictures. I believe my pictures, the x-ray images, chest x-ray. Okay, then it gets loaded to the system. Then we can show it. And close. A provider can also view reports, choosing the date, starting from April to 1st of June. Then you can view a summary or details. So the summary works as follows. This is a summary: the date, the provider name, the services provided, the number of services, and the amount. Details have the details of the visits. So here we have 153 visits in May, nervous, general, and so on. Finally, a very important feature for the providers which they can use is to view inline analytics. Inline analytics include, for example, the top 5 diseases. So we can see over here, we have the top 5 diseases, the month, the number of visits, the inpatients. We can also choose top 5 patients, Nashwa, Heba, and so on, the number of visits, and so on. This was for the provider. Now we can go to the physician. and see what features are available for a physician. We input a physician ID and the password and login, then choose the provider. Once the physician is registered to the system, he can add a new patient following exactly the same steps as before, search for a patient, that is searching for, of course, he can search for a patient using a national ID or patient name, update his profile, and add a visit. That was for the physician. And then for the patient, we have to input the patient ID. The patient's menu. Of course, a patient can update his profile. He can add personal history, family history. He can add medical documents. And he also can view some of the inline analytics, such as the costs of the services he had so far, the measures, the number of visits, and so on. A patient can also search for provider or physician. Can search by everything or by specific fields, and so on. He can search for a physician. Again, we can search for specific fields, and they can create or view patient reports. Then we can choose the date. We can see the visit ID, the provider name, the reason, the date, and the amount. Finally, we can view the admin to input the national ID of the admin. The admin has full privilege to do the following. He can activate or deactivate certain provider. For example, if that provider has paid the fees, so he can be activated. Can lock or unlock patient accounts depending on specific reasons, if he needs to lock some patient accounts. And can reset the passwords, can add new patients following the same procedures as before. Can view some reports, provide the reports, can view any of the reports. This was for the admin. Basically, the admins the system, administrates the system, activates, locks or unlocks, resets passwords, and adds a new patient. Finally, the system can be used by insurance and third-party administrator companies. This will be a future add-on to the system and should be available next release. It allows insurance companies to immediately track their medical claims released from different medical providers and pay them back instantly. and to detect the fraudulent threats that might be demonstrated by either the patients or the medical providers, allowing insurance providers to block those fraudsters. Thank you. Thank you.